the things that sustain us really is what nourishes us, and food is at the source of a lot of our wellness and well-being, and how we speak love into each other and how we speak love into our community. So the way that we have food access and the way that we nourish ourselves is so important. So I'm so excited to have this conversation as a decolonized food enthusiast, especially Afro-Caribbean food. I'm very excited for this conversation. And just in general, food access in Chicago, as we know, is a huge, huge concern and on the forefront of a lot of our minds and stomachs. So I'm excited for this next session around food equity and growth of urban agriculture. We have, again, if you've seen the last conversation, this is going to be something that's just sparking so many ideas. And remember, all of these amazing panelists will be available in the hallway afterwards for conversation. Just remember that we also have resources of engagement activities in the hall afterwards, but also there, if you want to find them on the interwebs, Al Gore's internet, the algorithms, the information is in your program. It's in your program. So you can always find what they're talking about, what projects they're leading, and their initiatives on their own websites. Please take a moment during our extended breaks to find out more about all of these incredible panelists. Without further ado, please welcome to the stage, we have here in the first seat, Elizabeth Abnau from 40 Acres Fresh Market. Clap your hands like you are digesting something amazing. Erika Allen, Urban Growers Collective. Yes, Erika. Mecca Babe, Grow Greater Englewood, and Sistas in the Village. Dion Dawson from Dion Chicago Dream. Nick Davis, Community Food Navigator. And moderating this delicious panel, please welcome Ruby Ferguson from Greater Chicago Food Depository.
Thank you, and so happy to be in space with all of you. Before we hop right in, I think I want to take a pause and take a beat. We've had quite a week as a country, and oftentimes we come around a meal, a dinner table, a nourishing opportunity to connect with loved ones and heal. And so these are people I hold near and dear to my heart. And I'm so excited to invite you to a conversation that I feel like we've had cyclically in a lot of different spaces. And I'm gonna lean in hard to the theme and a dad joke of sorts of like inviting you to our dinner table. A lot of tables are exclusive. My dinner table is never exclusive. And so I hope you're pulling up, bringing a chair, bringing whatever you have to eat at your house, and will join us in this conversation. And so I want to kick it to Erika and really ground us in what does food equity mean in the context of Chicago? And as leaders on this stage, we don't really talk about food access. We talk about a step beyond that of food equity and food justice. And I would love to hear from someone who's been committed to this work in a transformative and transmutive way to talk about why we use that language.
Thank you, and so great to see so many people here interested from a civic engagement and community-based perspective. There's a lot of gravitas, it feels like, around this issue, especially with what could be some challenges around equity, which to me, equity, to answer the question, food equity is just really about having equitable access, that everybody in each of our communities, neighborhoods, has culturally appropriate, affordable, nutritionally dense, and consistently available good food. That can't be done without justice. So for me, food equity and food justice are companions. And in this kind of stage of transformation, thinking about transforming our food system, which everybody on this stage does, and I know many of you in this room do, it is really about looking at how we have the current food system, how it's set up. We're all complicit and all participating. Every time we go to the grocery store, every time we're looking for the lowest price, we're making those trade-offs. And as we move into thinking about an equitable food system, we're looking at across the food chain, the value chain, from the farmer to the chef to the retailer, that everybody is getting a fair share of that dollar. That currency is equitably distributed so that those systems can go from being linear to being circular. And that's something that, a lot of us who are have ancestors from the South or from other countries where there's food cultures intact, your butcher, your grain farmer, your carpenter. Like if you didn't have money or cash, you would trade services and goods. Those are all things that create a resilient system. Those are things that engage and have a generational kind of lineage. I say kind of lineage because I think we're just beginning to re-embrace that as a value, that we're looking at folks that are a little farther down the road, both in life experience and practical application, to guide the next generation, and for the next generation to respect that and to support, because we all need each other. We need the energy. We need to be able to transition the things that we've been able to accomplish. And I say that having done this work consistently for 25 years as an adult and growing up on a small family farm, the practical skills it takes to just become literate, proficient, to have a skill set, whether it's being a chef or being a grower, takes years. And that can be mitigated, that timeline can be mitigated when we're able to apprentice and learn from folks that have more experience. So that lineage, that reconnection, understanding those stories, connecting with our elders, all of my training came from my elders. And that as soon as I had a little bit of mastery, with humility, because you can never really learn everything as a grower, that I was trained to then pass that on immediately. And that helps to reinforce my understanding. I say, and we didn't do this, but my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I also use we and us, because I really think about the work I do not as a singular. I include myself in it. I'm a healthy person, so I'm a human, I have an ego. But I also think about how my work, the things that I have forged, how they impact the whole. And that, to me, having that consciousness, being able to culturally have that understanding, and to have the diversity of approach, the diversity of practice, the diversity of tradition is what food equity represents. And to have that supported by our government, that our government is in service to those ideals, and that throughout that there is a system of justice that supports at least a baseline of equitable access. I also don't like using access, because access can be, you can have, your all access pass, not everybody has that. I think of it as pathways, and forging pathways that are not razor thin or a little like trail you can barely see, but wide, open avenues where we can really see many options, and that our community has lots of options. So all of those things kind of represent that to me.
Thank you, Erika. And I feel like there's a theme of lineage and community and connection. And when folks reached out to us to ask us about doing this panel and talking about it, I think we all had a question of civics and what do we mean by civic engagement? And so I literally had to look up the definition to prep for today. And one that resonated with me was individual and collective actions designed to identify and address issues of public concern. And my good friend Dion reminds me all the time of how connected Chicago is in this food space, and how Chicago's got something to say, not something to prove, but kind of represents a model of what other cities, other communities can look to. And so I'd love to have you share some of that knowledge that you get to share with me all the time about that collective work.
Absolutely. In Chicago, we're blessed to have an abundance of talent, not just the people on the stage, but, a lot of the other, familiar names and faces when it comes to food equity, food justice, and understanding that there's a need for understanding of the food system. And so, asking questions, to ourselves of, okay, what did I eat today? And did I eat it because I wanted to, or because it was the only option that I had? And then really, taking the answers from those questions, me, myself, being a part of a group of leaders in this time that have kind of taken the baton and seeing that, as I've traveled throughout the country and a lot of us speak in different places, I've never been jealous of the talent that I've seen elsewhere. I always, relish in knowing that there's a myriad of approaches and programs and organizations, but there's this commitment to trying to get it right. And as a lot of people know, our organization is only a little over 4 years old, but not shying away from how that connects to the current food system, the current leaders, and making sure that we're intentional about building out the connectivity from what we do in the food system, which is delivery, transportation, and logistics, to then connecting that to Community Food Navigator, connecting it to Urban Growers Collective, to Growing Home, to Grow Greater Englewood, to everybody involved, and just having the conversation. Because I think that it's not lost on me that after a tumultuous week and a lot of hard truths, that we're here talking about being civically engaged, because I think that there's a certain need, not just in food, but just in general in this city, for really making sure that we really understand the role that we play when it comes to things that are concerning to the public, and the rights we have, and the responsibility that we share to maintain the things that we share and are responsible for in this democracy. So then when you're thinking about food, I've seen an abundance of talent. I think that administratively, we're not there yet in implementing at a city and state level the advances that we've seen when it comes to food and food access. But we're also, I think, as a group and as a collective, we haven't waited for someone to give us permission to connect to each other and really build robust approaches. I think we all have a very genuine love and togetherness and responsibility to make sure that we're not the ones that's preventing all of us from kind of moving forward.
Yeah, Dion, I love kind of how you're talking about everybody has almost like a role. I don't like that prescription, but a purpose and an intention, and how do we show up with our purpose and intentions to move collectively together and not wait for someone to organize us, but be a part of that organization. And I think there are different ways that we can engage civically to make transformation. And I'm looking at Mecca. Mecca's really humble, but she is the recipient of the first ever business license for urban agriculture in Chicago. Let's take a beat for that. And was a part at the table to help co-create what that business license would look like, helped vet if the application was a sound application, and is still navigating kind of how that shows up and what that means. And so I would love for you to talk about your process being civically engaged with creating something that can be transformative and being honest about the flaws and the beauty in being a part of that.
Thank you, Ruby. I think, the filling out the application, going through the process and help developing it was that part. And then it's actually in real time experiencing how using it is effective for a small scale grower. My partner and I, we are in the community of Englewood. We really have a community farm. So what we do is grow food for the community, and so our prices are very low. They're very obtainable for the community, right? So using a license, it would benefit us, as far as, when you have standards and procedures with the city and state of Illinois. Now, what we did not know and understand is how it looks to report back on taxes and being involved in that process. So I think we need more understanding, more training, more development of how this license is practical, can be practical for growers around Illinois, Chicago. And so in that respect, I think it's time to they used to do focus groups, and I know we're beyond because we've already had the focus, but post-focus groups or green table discussions about how effective this is. I would like to see more growers who have received this license and how they're utilizing it and what their response is to it. Because I will say the tax reporting part is the biggest, most challenging part, especially when all you want to do is grow food and grow food for a wonderful community and many communities around Chicago, right? And so being in this position where we have to do all this operation stuff, it's overwhelming altogether. But when you don't understand it and you haven't been given the tools to understand it, then it makes it difficult and it makes it, okay, I just don't want to do this. So we want to make this a robust benefit for growers, but if it's not, let's go back to the table and see what else we need to do, what other things we can do to implement something that works for us, because we are the ones that are using it and affected by it.
Yeah, thank you, Mecca. And I feel like I feel like what is a big theme there and something important to acknowledge is a lot of times when you talk about food access, it is at the sacrifice of the community members, right? Like it's not thinking about the long-term impact of that. And what this was a pathway to think about how we can make a viable business out of a food access solution so the community could benefit from that. And so I'm gonna shift to Liz really quickly. But want to start, I think Liz and I have something in common. We're both not from Chicago, but deeply committed to transforming, transmuting, evolving Chicago. And so she's done incredible work in the retail space, which again is this balance of has to be a viable business, but is a public health amenity that many places in Chicago do not have. And so I would love for Liz to talk more about what it's like to not be from Austin, but to show up in Austin and be committed to transforming Austin's food system.
Let's be clear, it was completely accidental. I did not come here intending to do anything that I am doing. I came here to go to business school. I came here to go back to corporate and to make a lot of money. I had no intention of being I didn't go to UFC for no reason. This was not the plan. So I don't know if I can answer that question in terms of well, I've just always wanted to do this. No, I wanted to get the hell out of grocery. I worked at General Mills for 10 years, and I hated grocery. It fucking sucks. Just being real. But here is the thing, is that when the only tool you have at your disposal is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so when I accidentally wound up in Austin, because I did not know I was even going to Austin that day, I was just trying to get an extra $50 out of a mystery shop so I could pay for my gym membership for the month. When I say it was an accident, it was a complete accident. But sometimes there's these prophetic accidents that happen in our life. And I could not ignore what I saw and experienced on the west side of Chicago when I went there without knowing that that is where I was going to do something else. And so I tell the story all the time. I hop off the 66 bus at Chicago Avenue in Laramie. And at that moment, I realized that I cannot do this mystery shop without cash. And I never carry cash. I was like, well, damn. Let me go find cash. And I could not do it. I could not do something as basic as take the money out of my account without paying an exorbitant ATM fee. And I am cheap. I am the cheapest person I know. Ask anybody who knows me. I don't like spending any more money than I have to on things that I don't want to spend it on. And I do not believe in spending $5 to take out 20. So I was like, let me go find my bank. I banked with Chase. I banked with a credit union at the time that had different non-fee ATMs, and there was nothing around. I'm looking at this building that says Laramie State Bank, and I'm like, is that open? Is it closed? What is it? If you know anything about the west side of Chicago and Austin, Laramie State Bank has been abandoned for I don't know how long. So I'm like, okay, so that's not a bank. There's nothing. Google's telling me there's nothing within a mile radius. I don't want to hop back on the bus. I'm trying to find something I can easily access through walking. So then, if you can't find a bank, the next best way to take out cash is to go to a retail outlet and make a payment and get your cash back. But there's no CVS, there's no Walgreens, there's no grocery store. There is nothing around to do something that I take for granted in the South Loop. I took it for granted that I can do these things in the South Loop, or that I could do these things in Lakeview, or that I could do these things in River North, or that I could do these things in Lakeshore East or in Westtown. And then you look around and you're like, huh, you're black? You're black? Oh, you're black too. Oh, look, we're all black here together. And there's not basic resources here. And I am not going to say that at that very instant, I was like, I want to build a grocery store. Because that was not, I was just like, I just want to get the hell out of here. That's what I was really thinking. But that changed the way I viewed Chicago from then on. And so as your perspective on this city changes and you see the inequity and you see it break down along racial lines, because I had spent 10 years at General Mills and the only thing I know is grocery, the only thing that came into my mind is, you know what this neighborhood needs? It needs a new grocery store, and I'm going to be the one to do it, which was the dumbest thing I could have ever thought in my entire life, because, whew, your girl is stressed. But I didn't have intention when I showed up in Austin. It was accidental. I had an idea, and I kicked it around for nearly a year before life happened, and I lost my really good paying Microsoft job with wonderful benefits and great stock options. And I was like, what am I gonna do? And luckily I was in a position to be like, well, I don't have to immediately go back to work. I have saved well, I have set myself up well where I can float myself, where I figure things out. And honestly, 40 acres was a lark. It was just like, just try it. Just try it and see what happens. And almost 7 years later, what happens is that we're building a full brick and mortar store on Chicago Avenue, which will never be finished because there is always some unforeseen condition on this property, and the city takes forever to give permits, and it all sucks. And I honestly feel like the guinea pig of rebuilding black grocery retail in Chicago. I feel like a really big guinea pig. But at a certain point, it was like, you've come too far to turn back. So whether I wanted to, whether I intended to commit myself to this, I'm committed. I ain't going nowhere, and the city of Chicago owns me for the next 7 years. So I'm in it. So that's an honest answer. This was not intentional. I would really appreciate some really good benefits right now.
We would expect nothing less of pure honesty from Liz, which is why I love sharing space with you. And I want to offer a reframe. I don't think you're a guinea pig. I think you're an innovator. And I say that because it's important. That story shows your commitment to innovation. And not because someone said no, or it's not possible, that you didn't continue to push and understand and dig deeper.
My mother always said I was hard-headed, and she is right. When I get an idea in my head, I am a pit bull. And so a lot of what goes into 40 acres is just wanting to prove others wrong about what they say about our communities, what our communities can sustain, what our communities can accomplish. I am so very sick and tired of the belief in the infallibility of white men. So because they say their businesses cannot work in our communities, that means no one's can. And so, yes, part of this is just pure ego, pure stubbornness, pure fuck you. Just being honest.
And I feel like that tenacity is Chicago in a nutshell. And we see innovators, we see folks committed to not saying that the old system doesn't work and so it's not gonna work, but how do we expand our understanding of what is possible? And I feel like a lot of that work shows up in the work that Nick leads at Community Food Navigator, of how do we connect all of those people who are foolish enough in some people's eyes to think of the inevitable magnificence that could be Chicago's food system in the future. And so I'd love for you to talk about the role of communication and connectivity and Community Food Navigator and connecting all of these innovators and engineers here in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely, Ruby, thank you. I think that one thing that the food system has historically suffered from is also very common with what happens when like nonprofits are left to do the life-giving work that the state or our government should be able to do for us, which is that because you have to go after certain types of funding, the lane that you are in starts to become narrower and narrower. Oh, I'm like a nonprofit that's serving, women over 40 that are veterans in Austin. And you do this, right, so that you can like go after the specific funding that's been made available because of, whatever report that's come out that says that, black women over 40 that are veterans in Austin, are suffering disproportionately from X thing. And I think what we have found in recent years is that there's a necessity to start to kind of break down the silos that starts to form, right? People are engaged in, grocery store work. People are engaged in actual like farming work, right? People are engaged in, like Dion in food distribution and feeding the community. And oftentimes these things are seen as, distinct roles to have within a food system, and what the people on this stage and other folks in the community have been able to do is to do away with all of those and really get in each other's business and say, how does your work affect mine? And in order to do that, to Mecca's point earlier, farmers in particular in Chicago are asked to do a ridiculous amount of labor to be able to do what they do. You have to be a soil scientist, you have to be a land access expert, you've got to be a tax expert, you got to be an accountant, you got to be a grant manager, you have to understand how to engage the community, how to pull volunteers out, how to communicate about yourselves, e-commerce, all the rest, right? How do we expect one person to be able to do all of those things in a city that has not historically even invested in helping people get on the land in the first place? And so what we start to find is that all of us have actually been doing all of those things in our various fields, but if we can figure out ways to lean on each other, then we start to understand where we can accumulate power, share resources, and kind of spread our capacity amongst ourselves, right? And not just hold, all of the enormity of the responsibility that being an actor within the food system takes. I mean, Dion, if you were to stop doing your work for a month, there'd be hundreds of families that wouldn't know where their next meal is coming from, right? Thousands of families that wouldn't know where their next meal is coming from, right? If you'll understand the amount of pressure that comes with, and then the caliber of leader that is kind of emerging from this to end up on a stage with you here, and imagine that we've got dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of those sorts of leaders all throughout Chicago that have just not been given the tools to understand or the capacity to understand who is doing similar work around me, what are the models that they're using, where are they getting funding, and how can we start to, instead of being on this pattern of chasing after whatever funding is available, start to build a power base to be able to make some demands and say, we understand what our community needs. We're out and interfacing with them on a daily basis and engaging with them. We are the community. And instead of being responsive to whatever trickles down from the powers that be, making sure that we have a firm base of community members who all have a common sense of what food justice means to them, what levers they have to pull to be able to get resources to their community, and who is doing some of the basic work around them. And one other note I want to make too is when Dion mentioned that his project started up about 4 years ago. In times of crisis is really when you're going to see this community kick into deeper and deeper gear. And I think what I would encourage all of you all to do is figure out a way to get involved in folks who are doing food justice work, because food justice often ends up at the very root of a lot of the other issues that we're dealing with. Who has access to land, who can materially grow their own food to be able to sustain themselves, and are we doing the like movement and resistance work that we're doing on empty stomachs or not? And I think all of those are really significant questions to ask. But you also find that when you're involved in urban agriculture work, if you all haven't, I would urge you to volunteer on one of the farms that you see up here. Sticking your hands in the soil forces your body to remember what it is like to engage with the miracle really that is bringing food out of the ground, right? And be connected with all of the hands that are touching the food from point A to point B. And I think a lot of issues in our society come also from the isolation of a lot of the people who are doing this work, pushed further and further out of the city. It's more difficult for them to organize. They're not delivering the food anymore. To Ruby's point, they're not your butcher. They might give up their pigs to somebody who's going to drive it to a processing facility, who's going to drive it to the grocery store, so on. And then you end up, multiple degrees away from the people who are actually doing that work. There are hundreds of spaces like this in Chicago, from community gardens to urban farms of various scales. And we really need to, you all for your own sake, need to understand who is growing that food. Because as we saw in 2020, the people who understood who was growing food and where was food was being grown and what quantities, and then had the tools to do, store it and transport it, and knew which families were in need and what doors to knock on. Those are the people who were able to kick into gear, right? And so you need to understand that as we brace ourselves for whatever it is that's coming up, that the most important thing is that you understand who is going to feed you and resource your neighbors. And I think the people on this stage have been doing a really good job of building a relational network that can very quickly start to activate these resources and grow them out. And so, yeah, I've got more thoughts, but yeah, I'll pause there.
No, I don't want to cut you off. I want to build on a thread and open it up to other folks on the stage. We started the conversation holding space and acknowledging what doesn't really feel like a shift, but a continuation of the status quo for the country and kind of where we're at. And that can often come paired with a feeling of hopelessness. And so we originally thought of kind of closing this out of what can you do to be civically engaged? But this feels almost more like, what can you do to be civically engaged when it comes to food justice? And so Nick, you started to touch on some of that, but I would love to open up to these brilliant minds to kind of share with folks in the audience of, if you're feeling charged up, if it feels like I need to engage with our food system preemptively before dramatic changes happen, or because you're upset with where it is now, what would you tell people to do?
Well, if you're not pissed off, then you're not paying attention. I think that I'm going to use a reference from The Office. If anybody here loves The Office, then you'll get a kick out of this. There's a part in the show when the main character, Michael, is basically negotiating a buyout from his old company. And it always stands out to me because, here's the conglomerate telling this small business owner, look, you can't go on. And I'll never forget, this is literally how I am 24/7 running our organization. And he just says to them, I'll never give up. I have infinite amount of names of companies that I'm going to keep filing, and I won't stop. And I think that's the type of attitude that we all have to have. We're not here as leaders that you have to follow. We are an example of you, and you all have to be more engaged with understanding what you can do, what we can do, and then what we all can do together. And so if you leave, if there's anything that you can leave here with, understand that you are not a bystander in this democracy. You are not a bystander in this food system. You are an active participant. Your dollars matter, whether it's one or a million. And the more you get that through your thick ass head, the more you will understand that we all have power beyond belief. I do not walk in any room apologizing for who I am, where I come from, the lack of money that I have, the lack of relationships. The only thing I'm concerned with is if you've seen this Denzel Washington clip on TikTok, I'm gonna leave with something. Okay? I'm gonna leave with something. And when it comes to food, at the end of the day, food is life. Period. And what we all have committed our life's work to is understanding that we want that 30-year gap in living between Streeterville and Englewood to decrease. And if it moves a fucking fraction, then we've done our job and we can pass the baton. But this is not us as experts sitting here saying, hey, we know everything. No, I just will never stop trying. I'm going to keep failing. I'm going to keep figuring it out. And we're delivering to 172 zip codes per week, and we're still not satisfied. We're not shying away from the fact that there is great need out there. We're not shying away from the fact that right now in this country, things are weird, but it is okay. Because our ancestors went through much worse physical, mental, emotional, spiritual violence, persecution, separation. And so the only thing that I have to do is make sure that I understand the power of my smile, my joy, my work, and I will be relentless. And in order for this to go even further, I understand that I cannot do it without them, I cannot do it without you all, and a clear understanding that I do not know. I don't know. I wake up every morning understanding it and accepting that I don't have to have the answers, but the longer I search for them, the more that I learn, the more that I respect, the more that I uplift black women, the more that I love black women, the more that I love everybody, the more that I say the things that I need to say and do the things that I need to do, then I figured out that it'll just be better in the wash. I don't know where we're going to end up, but I do know that if I just commit to being the best person I can be. And that's what this is about the city of Chicago having a collective group of people that just want to be good people. And we can all figure out what that result will look like. And the food system is just a microcosm of the greater need for everybody to be accountable, responsible, and also have some fucking fun. Because this is amazing, fun work. And Liz dropped the F-bomb first, so I can do it. That's it. Once the floodgates opened, you know what I mean? But it's from a sense of joy and a sense of care and a sense of appreciation of what we can accomplish together. And the more people can be connected to this local food system that will then connect to the national food system that will then allow everyone to have more collective power.
I think in the context of this day and this week, this era that we're about to all embark on together, is just to know who's growing your food, connect, volunteerism. We got some differing opinions up here about volunteerism. To me, being able to support and be connected to the food system in real, tangible, physical ways is critical because it really creates the understanding of how hard it is to grow food, especially in the city. It's like the hardest thing to do because you have to literally create soil, you have to maintain it, there's toxins, there's all kinds of dynamics around where you're growing that you're actually influencing. Everywhere that we're growing or distributing food or setting up retail, we're making safer, we're creating hopeful opportunities for our young people and for our elders because we're transforming and transmuting a reality that didn't exist before we showed up. So every little garden that may be full of weeds, go ahead and sign up with the Community Food Navigator and find out what is within walking distance. I can guarantee there is a project within walking distance that you can get involved with, support, just bring your gifts to, because when the shit goes down, you want to know where your food is coming from. You want to know where your water is coming from. You want to make sure you have shelter, and you want to have the ability to be able to mutually support and create circular economic and other shared resources if things get tough. We saw that with the pandemic. Some people became farmers during the pandemic and really kind of built their skills and got inspired to do that. I'm saying who. And it was, sometimes it is crisis that we rise, right? I mean, when there's crisis, we're not supposed to just lay down. We're Americans, and we welcome everybody who's fleeing from crisis. And we embrace, because we're on the bones of the ancestors of this indigenous land, that we are still here and we are sovereign. And having food and having access shared, no one owns the earth, no one owns the land. And we can support ourselves. It's a fallacy that we cannot feed ourselves. We've done it, we can do it, we will do it. Yes. And we represent not ourselves as individuals, but the movement that facets, the multifaceted nature of the food system. It's part of being a human, and we're human. No one's better or lesser than anyone else. And once we're able to see that and project that, things will shift. In the short term, we're gonna eat some delicious food, we're gonna rest this winter, we're gonna organize, and organize to implement. Organize to implement, organize to implement. Chicago is a city of big shoulders. We do stuff here.
Yes, we do. And
we don't just talk. I mean, people say we Windy City because we talk too much. It literally is windy. We do things here. And the things we've done in urban agriculture and community food systems have transformed the world already, just by example. So I just encourage you all to get serious, get involved, have humility, bring your skills, and understand history and why it has been so challenging. That is your civic responsibility. That's our responsibility, and we were driven to do this work. So thank you.
I want to say thank you. I want to say really quick, and it's real simple. Learn how to grow your own food, too. Because in the midst of all of this, yes, we are these amazing people who grow food, but it's your God-given right to know how to grow your own food. That way you can't question where it comes from. The source will be you, and all the elements that come along with it. And support your local farmers also. And support your community of growers and organizations that can teach you how to grow food. Ashe.
I also say, I can? Thank you so kindly. I saw the time go back up.
That's right.
We had extra time. I'd have thought of some more stuff to say, but that's all I have.
Look at that.
You speak on it.
That there are opportunities because we all do different things on this stage. We have growers, we have grocers, we have logistics and delivery experts on this stage, we have conveners on this stage. And so there are different ways to plug into all of it. Like my charge isn't like come volunteer, because guess what? I can't have volunteers. There's this federal labor standards thing that says I have to pay people and stuff. So yeah, I know they do too, but you do. You have, your staff is amazing. I'm saying I can't accept volunteers at all. So when people ask how can you support 40 Acres, my thing is sign up for our newsletter, shop with us. Thank you, Maria. She's like 2 months on our subscription service. Find ways to orient your life around the values that you have when it comes to food. And oftentimes it doesn't even require a sacrifice to do that. It's not just something nice to do. What you are doing is you are creating the world and the ecosystems that you want to live within.
So we have about 1 minute left, and I am a believer in the magic of manifestation, and we have some alchemists on the stage. And I heard some of us talking about being optimists, but I really don't. I think we're alchemists, and it's not that we're blindly optimistic, but we know that with intention, anything is possible. And so this is going to be tough. But for our dessert, for our little dinner party, I would love for a few words on where you envision Chicago's food system going in the next 10 years.
So I think that in the next 10 years, I do not think Chicago's food system will move linearly. Nothing ever does. The change is always moving forward, but it is not linear. It goes down, it goes sideways, it goes backwards. And I think that what we have to do in this room is be committed to the overall progress, even if there are challenges, even if there are givebacks in individual methods and steps of how to get there. So I don't want to speak this into existence, but I'm a business owner and I know that this is possible. If 40 acres ceases to exist in 2 years because we just can't make it work commercially, that does not mean that commercial food retail doesn't work in our community. It means I couldn't figure it out in time. So now somebody else takes what I've learned and you move on with that. If something happens with a law that makes it farmland in Chicago harder to get, it does not mean that we abandon urban agriculture. So I don't know where Chicago's food system will go or what it will look like, but I do know that it will be a constant ebb and flow of progress, and that the commitment has to be to that progress and not any individual mechanism to get there.
Awesome. We are rule breakers, so we have to do a lightning round of like 1 to 2 words. Sentences.
The vision I'll share is I see a vision of every block having edible forests, having green energy that folks understand and participate in, having a carbon, climate resilient economy. So actually shifting our currency from an exploitive, I call it ratchet economics system, to something that we're compensated and can trade carbon credits as a value system, because we need to preserve and restore our world, that our rural farms and farmland is transformed to grow food for our people in this food shed and elsewhere when there's imbalances, that people are able to see their future within their own community, don't need to look elsewhere, but instead travel to visit other communities to learn and share and exchange, and that our health is measured in terms of joy and happiness and comfort, and that we have decriminalized poverty and the unresolved trauma and PTSD of racialized terror over history, because we still have not resolved that, and that all of those things are happening in beautiful spaces that are filled with native plants and food and flowers, and that all facets of nature are able to coexist. So I go big, because if I don't see it, and I see that because we have that already in these small, beautiful spaces that we have transformed, that can proliferate. And that through that resistance and that beautiful resistance and creating new circular economies, that Liz does not have to worry about her amazing grocery store, and that sacrifice, that foundational trailblazing is not only supported, but the things that she's learning, she can share with others to replicate her success. And that we're not going to allow beautiful, important, critical spaces and businesses to fail because of this aggressive and unrealistic and unsustainable current economic system. Ashe. Oh.
Yep. So we'll stop here.
Oh.
For Mecca, Nick, Dion, if you want to hear their vision, their manifestation will be outside. I hope you enjoyed our dinner.
A big round of applause. Can we get a lot of love for these incredible panelists? Thank you so much to Elizabeth, Erika, Mecca, Dion, Nick, and Ruby for moderating. Again, we will continue to have this conversation in the hallway. There's a lot to be had. Thank you so much for all of your vision, your wisdom, your experience, and again, just so eloquent, complete visionaries. And thank you for reminding us the importance to go back to soil and go back to each other in our community. And yeah, you all are wearing many, many hats.